Section 10 of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, translated by Frank Justice Miller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Thomas Copeland. Book 8, Part 1. Now when Lucifer had banished night and ushered in the shining day, the east wind fell, and moist clouds arose. The peaceful south wind offered a safe return to Cephalus and the mustered troops of Aeacus, and, speeding their voyage, brought them sooner than they had hoped to their desired haven. Meanwhile King Minos was laying waste the coast of Megara, and was trying his martial strength against the city of Alcathous, note, i.e. Megara, return to text, where Nisus reigned. This Nisus had, growing on his head, amidst his locks of honoured grey, a brilliant purple lock, on whose preservation rested the safety of his throne. 6 times had the new moon shown her horns, and still the fate of war hung in the balance. So long did victory hover on doubtful wings between the two. There was a royal tower reared on the tuneful walls, where Latona's son was said to have laid down his golden lyre, whose music still lingered in the stones. Often to this tower the daughter of King Nisus used to climb and set the rocks resounding with a pebble, in the day when peace was. Also, after the war began, she would often look out from this place upon the rough martial combats. And now, as the war dragged on, she had come to know even the names of the warring chieftains, their arms, their horses, their dress, their Cretan quivers. And, above all others, did she know the face of their leader, Europa's son. Yes, better than she should. If he had hidden his head in a crested casque, Minos in a helmet was lovely to her eyes, or if he carried his shining golden shield, the shield became him well. Did he hurl his tough spear with tense muscles, the girl admired the strength and the skill he showed. Did he bend the wide curving bow with arrow fitted to the string, thus she would swear that Phoebus stood with arrows in his hand. But when unhelmed he showed his face, when clad in purple he bestrode his milk-white steed, gorgeous with broidered trappings, and managed the foaming bit, then was Nisus' daughter hardly her own, hardly mistress of a sane mind. Happy the javelin which he touched, and happy the reins which he held in his hand, she thought. She longed, were it but allowed, to speed her maiden steps through the foeman's line. She longed to leap down from her lofty tower into the Cretan camp, to open the city's bronze-bound gates to the enemy, to do any other thing which Minos might desire. And as she sat gazing at the white tents of the Cretan king, she said, "Whether I should rejoice or grieve at this woeful war, I cannot tell. I grieve because Minos is the foe of her who loves him. But if there were no war, he would never have been known to me. Suppose he had me as a hostage, then he could give up the war. I should be in his company, should be a pledge of peace. If she who bore you, O loveliest of all the world, was such as you are, good reason was it that the god burned for her. Oh, thrice happy should I be, if only I might fly through the air and stand within the camp of the Cretan king, and confess my love, and ask what dower he would wish to be paid for me. Only let him not ask my country's citadel, for may all my hopes of wedlock perish ere I gain it by treachery. And yet oft times many have found it good to be overcome, when an appeased victor has been merciful. Surely he wages a just war for his murdered son, and he is strong both in his cause and in the arms that defend his cause. We shall be conquered, I am sure, and if that doom awaits our city, why shall his warrior hand unbar these walls of ours, and not my love? Far better will it be without massacre and suspense, and the cost of his own blood, for him to conquer. In that case, truly, I should not fear lest someone should pierce your breast unwittingly, dear Minos, for if not unwitting, who so cruel that he could bring himself to throw his pitiless spear at you?" She likes the plan, and decides to give up herself, with her country as her dowry, and so to end the war. But merely to will is not enough. A watch guards the entry. My father holds the keys of the city gates. Him only do I fear, unhappy. Only he delays the wish of my heart. Would to God I had no father! But surely every one is his own God. Fortune resists half-hearted prayers. Another girl in my place, fired with so great a love, would long since have destroyed, and that with joy, whatever stood in the way of her love. And why should another be braver than I? Through fire and sword would I dare go, and yet here there is no need of fire or sword. I need but my father's lock of hair. That is to me more precious than gold. That purple lock will make me blessed, will give me my heart's desire. While she thus spoke, night came on, most potent healer of our cares, and with the darkness her boldness grew. The first rest had come, when sleep holds the heart weary with the cares of day. The daughter steals silently into her father's chamber, and oh, the horrid crime! She despoils him of the tress where his life lay. With this cursed prize, through the midst of her foes, so sure is she of a welcome for her deed, she goes straight to the king, and thus she addresses him, startled at her presence. Love has led me to this deed. I, Scylla, daughter of King Nisus, do here deliver to your hands my country and my house. I ask no reward save only you. Take as the pledge of my love this purple lock, and know that I am giving to you not a lock, but my father's life. And in her sin-stained hand she held out the prize to him. Minos recoiled from the proffered gift, and in horror at the sight of so unnatural an act, he replied, May the gods banish you from their world, O foul disgrace of our age! May both land and sea be denied to you. Be sure that I shall not permit so vile a monster to set foot on Crete, my world, the cradle of Jove's infancy. He spoke, and when this most upright lawgiver had imposed laws upon his conquered foes, he bade loose the hawsers of his fleet, and the rowers to man the bronze-bound ships. When Scylla saw that the ships were launched and afloat, and that the king refused her the reward of her sin, having prayed until she could pray no more, she became violently enraged, and, stretching out her hands, with streaming hair and mad with passion, she exclaimed, Whither do you flee, abandoning the giver of your success, O you whom I put before my fatherland, before my father? Whither do you flee, you cruel man, whose victory is my sin, 'tis true, but is my merit also? Does not the gift I gave move you? Do not my love and all my hopes built on you alone? Deserted, whither shall I go? Back to my fatherland? It lies overthrown. But suppose it still remained, it is closed to me by my treachery, to my father's presence, him whom I betrayed to you. My countrymen hate me, and with just cause. The neighboring peoples fear my example. I am banished from all the world, that Crete alone might be open to me. And if you forbid me Crete as well, and, oh, ungrateful, leave me here, Europa is not your mother, but the inhospitable Syrtis, the Armenian Tigris, and storm-tossed Charybdis. You are no son of Jove, nor was your mother tricked by the false semblance of a bull. That story of your birth is a lie. It was a real bull that begot you, a fierce, wild thing that loved no heifer. Inflict my punishment, O Nisus, my father. Rejoice in my woes, O ye walls that I have but now betrayed, for I confess that I have merited your hate, and I deserve to die. But let some one of those whom I have foully injured slay me. Why should you, who have triumphed through my sin, punish my sin? Let this act, which was a crime against my country and my father, be but a service in your eyes. She is a true mate for you. Note, Pasiphae, the wife of Minos and mother of the Minotaur. Return to text. She is a true mate for you, who with unnatural passion deceived the savage bull by that shape of wood, and bore a hybrid offspring in her womb. Does my voice reach your ears? Or do the same winds blow away my words to emptiness that fill your sails, you ingrate? Now Now I do not wonder that Pasiphae preferred the bull to you, for you were a more savage beast than he. Alas for me! He orders his men to haste away, and the waves resound as the oars dash into them, and I and my land are both fading from his sight. But it is in vain. You have forgotten my deserts in vain. I shall follow you against your will, and clinging to the curving stern I shall be drawn over the long reaches of the sea. Scarce had she spoken, when she leaped into the water, swam after the ship, her passion giving strength, and clung, hateful and unwelcome, to the Cretan boat. When her father saw her, for he was hovering in the air, having but now been changed into an osprey with tawny wings, he came on that he might tear her, as she clung there, with his hooked beak. In terror she let go her hold upon the boat, and as she fell, the light air seemed to hold her up and keep her from touching the water. She was like a feather. Changed to a feathered bird, she is called Icarus, and takes this name from the shorn lock of hair. Note, Icarus, as if from Kiro, I cut. Return to text. Minos duly paid his vows to Jove, 100 bulls, when he disembarked upon the Cretan strand, and he hung up his spoils of war to adorn his palace. But now his family's disgrace had grown big, and the queen's foul adultery was revealed to all by her strange hybrid monster child. Minos planned to remove this shame from his house, and to hide it away in a labyrinthine enclosure with blind passages. Daedalus, a man famous for his skill in the builder's art, planned and performed the work. He confused the usual passages and deceived the eye by a conflicting maze of diverse winding paths. Just as the watery meander plays in the Phrygian fields, flows back and forth in doubtful course, and, turning back on itself, beholds its own waves coming on their way, and sends its uncertain waters now towards their source, and now towards the open sea, so Daedalus made those innumerable winding passages, and was himself scarce able to find his way back to the place of entry, so deceptive was the enclosure he had built. In this labyrinth Minos shut up the monster of the bull-man form, and twice he fed him on Athenian blood, but the third tribute, demanded after each 9 years, brought the creature's overthrow. And when, by the virgin Ariadne's help, the difficult entrance which no former adventurer had ever reached again was found, by winding up the thread, straightway the son of Aegeus, taking Minos' daughter, spread his sails for Dia, and on that shore he cruelly abandoned his companion. To her, deserted and bewailing bitterly, Baucis brought love and help, and that she might shine among the deathless stars, he sent the crown she wore up to the skies. Through the thin air it flew, and as it flew its gems were changed to gleaming fires, and, still keeping the appearance of a crown, it took its place between the kneeler and the serpent-holder. Note the constellations of Hercules and Ophiuchus. Return to text. Meanwhile Daedalus, hating Crete and his long exile, and longing to see his native land, was shut in by the sea. Though he may block escape by land and water, he said, yet the sky is open, and by that way will I go. Though Minos rules over all, he does not rule the air. So saying, he sets his mind at work upon unknown arts, and changes the laws of nature. For he lays feathers in order, beginning at the smallest, short next to long, so that you would think they had grown upon a slope. Just so the old-fashioned rustic panpipes with their unequal reeds rise one above another. Then he fastened the feathers together with twine and wax at the middle and bottom, and thus arranged he bent them with a gentle curve, so that they looked like real birds' wings. His son Icarus was standing by, and, little knowing that he was handling his own peril, with gleeful face would now catch at the feathers which some passing breeze had blown about, now mold the yellow wax with his thumb, and by his sport would hinder his father's wondrous task. When now the finishing touches had been put upon the work, The master workman himself balanced his body on 2 wings, and hung poised on the beaten air. He taught his son also, and said, I warn you, Icarus, to fly in a middle course, lest if you go too low, the water may weight your wings. If you go too high, the fire may burn them. Fly between the 2. And I bid you not to shape your course by Baucis or Helike, or the drawn sword of Orion, but fly where I shall lead. At the same time he tells him the rules of flight, and fits the strange wings on his boy's shoulders. While he works and talks, the old man's cheeks are wet with tears, and his fatherly hands tremble. He kissed his son, which he was destined never again to do, and rising on his wings, he flew on ahead, fearing for his companion, just like a bird which has led forth her fledglings from the high nest into the unsubstantial air. He encourages the boy to follow, instructs him in the fatal art of flight, himself flapping his wings and looking back on his son. Now some fisherman spies them, angling for fish with his flexible rod, or a shepherd leaning upon his crook, or a ploughman on his plough handles, spies them, and stands stupefied, and believes them to be gods, that they could fly through the air. And now Juno's sacred Samos has been passed on the left, and Delos and Paros. Labynthus was on the right, and Calymne, rich in honey, when the boy began to rejoice in his bold flight, and, deserting his leader, led by a desire for the open sky, directed his course to a greater height. The scorching rays of the nearer sun softened the fragrant wax which held his wings. The wax melted. His arms were bare as he beat them up and down, but, lacking wings, they took no hold on the air. His lips, calling to the last upon his father's name, were drowned in the dark blue sea, which took its name from him. But the unhappy father, now no longer father, called, Icarus, Icarus, where are you? In what place shall I seek you? Icarus, he called again, and then he spied the wings floating on the deep, and cursed his skill. He buried the body in a tomb, and the land was called from the name of the buried boy. As he was consigning the body of his ill-fated son to the tomb, a chattering partridge looked out from a muddy ditch and clapped her wings, uttering a joyful note. She was at that time a strange bird, of a kind never seen before, and but lately made a bird. A lasting reproach to you, Daedalus. For the man's sister, ignorant of the fates, had sent him her son to be trained, a lad of teachable mind, who had now passed his 12th birthday. This boy, moreover, observed the backbone of a fish, and, taking it as a model, cut a row of teeth in a thin strip of iron, and thus invented the saw. He also was the first to bind 2 arms of iron together at a joint, so that, while the arms kept the same distance apart, one might stand still while the other should trace a circle. Daedalus envied the lad, and thrust him down headlong from the sacred citadel of Minerva, with a lying tale that the boy had fallen. But Pallas, who favors the quick of wit, caught him up, and made him a bird, and clothed him with feathers in mid-air. His old quickness of wit passed into his wings and legs, but he kept the name which he had before. Still the bird does not lift her body high in flight, nor build her nest on trees or on high points of rock, but she flutters along near the ground and lays her eggs in hedgerows, and, remembering that old fall, she is ever fearful of lofty places. Now the land of Aetna received the weary Daedalus, where King Cocculus took up arms in the suppliant's defence, and was esteemed most kind. Note: this phrase has no point, and there seems to be something wrong with the text. Return to text. Now also Athens, thanks to Theseus, had ceased to pay her doleful tribute. The temple is wreathed with flowers. The people call on Minerva, goddess of battles, with Jove and the other gods, whom they worship with sacrificial blood, with gifts and burning incense. Quick-flying fame had spread the name of Theseus through all the towns of Greece, and all the peoples of rich Achaia prayed his help in their own great perils. Suppliant Calydon sought his help with anxious prayers, although she had her Meleager. The cause of seeking was a monster boar, the servant and avenger of outraged Diana. For they say that Oeneus, king of Calydon, in thanksgiving for a bounteous harvest time, paid the first fruits of the grain to Ceres, paid his wine to Baucis, and her own flowing oil to golden-haired Minerva. Beginning with the rural deities, the honor they craved was paid to all the gods of heaven. Only Diana's altar was passed by, they say, and left without its incense. Anger also can move the gods. But we shall not bear this without vengeance, she said, and though unhonored, it shall not be said that we are unavenged. And the scorned goddess sent over Oeneus' fields an avenging boar, as great as the bulls which feed on grassy Epirus, and greater than those of Sicily. His eyes glowed with blood and fire, his neck was stiff and high, his bristles stood up like lines of stiff spear-shaft. Amidst deep hoarse grunts the hot foam flecked his broad shoulders. His tusks were long as the Indian elephant's. Lightning flashed from his mouth. The herbage shriveled beneath his breath. Now he trampled down the young corn in the blade, and now he laid waste the full-grown crops of some farmer who was doomed to mourn, and cut off the ripe grain in the ear. In vain the threshing floor, in vain the granary awaited the promised harvests. The heavy bunches of grapes with their trailing vines were cast down, and berry and branch of the olive, whose leaf never withers. He vents his rage on the cattle, too. Neither herdsmen nor dogs can protect them, nor can the fierce bulls defend their herds. The people flee in all directions, nor do they count themselves safe until protected by a city's walls. Then, at last, Meleager and a picked band of youths assembled, fired with the love of glory. The twin sons of Leda, wife of Tyndarus, one famous for boxing, the other for horsemanship, Jason, the first ship's builder, Theseus and Pirithous, inseparable friends, the two sons of Thestius, note Plexippus and Toxius, brothers of Althea, the mother of Meleager, return to text, Lynceus and swift-footed Idas, sons of Apharius, Caeneus, no longer a woman, note, see Book 12, lines 189 and following, return to text, warlike Leucippus and Acastus, famed for his javelin, Hippothous and Dryas, Phoenix, the son of Amyntor, Actor's two sons, note Eurytus and Cleotus, return to text, and Ilian Phyleus. Telamon was also there, and the father of great Achilles, and along with the son of Phares, note Admetus, return to text, and Boeotian Iolaus were Eurytion, quick in action, and Echion, of unconquered speed, Locrian Lilex, Panopeus, Hylias, and Hippasus, keen for the fray, Nestor, then in the prime of his years, and those whom Hippocoon sent from ancient Amyclae. The father-in-law of Penelope, note Laertes, return to text, and Arcadian Ancaeus, Ampycus' prophetic son, note Mopsus, return to text, and the son of Oicleus, note Amphiaraus, return to text, who had not yet been ruined by his wife, and Atalanta of Tegea, the pride of the Arcadian woods. A polished buckle clasped her robe at the neck. Her hair, plainly dressed, was caught up in one knot. From her left shoulder hung an ivory quiver, resounding as she moved with its shafts, and her left hand held a bow. Such was she in dress. As for her face, it was one which you could truly say was maidenly for a boy, or boyish for a maiden. As soon as his eyes fell on her, the Caledonian hero straightway longed for her, but God forbade. He felt the flames of love steal through his heart, and, "Oh, happy man," he said, "if ever that maiden shall deem any man worthy to be hers." Neither the occasion nor his own modesty permitted him more words. The greater task of the mighty conflict urged him to action. There was a dense forest that past ages had never touched with the axe, rising from the plain and looking out on the downward sloping fields. When the heroes came to this, Some stretched the hunting nets, some slipped the leashes from the dogs, some followed the well-marked trail as they longed to come at their dangerous enemy. There was a deep dell where the rain-water from above drained down. The lowest part of this marshy spot was covered with a growth of pliant willows, sedge-grass, and swamp rushes, osiers and tall bulrushes, with an undergrowth of small reeds. From this covert the boar was roused, and launched himself with a mad rush against his foes, like lightning struck out from the clashing clouds. The grove is laid low by his onrush, and the trees crash as he knocks against them. The heroes raise a halloo, and with unflinching hands hold their spears poised, with the broad iron heads well forward. The boar comes rushing on, scatters the dogs one after another as they strive to stop his mad rush, and thrusts off the baying pack with his deadly sidelong stroke. The first spear, thrown by Echion's arm, missed its aim and struck glancing on the trunk of a maple tree. The next, if it had not been thrown with too much force, seemed sure of transfixing the back where it was aimed. It went too far. Jason of Percasae was the marksman. Then Mopsus cried, "O Phoebus, if I have ever worshipped, and do still worship thee, grant me with unerring spear to reach my mark." So far as possible the god heard his prayer. His spear did strike the boar, but without injury. For Diana had wrenched the iron point from the javelin as it sped, and pointless the wooden shaft struck home. But the beast's savage anger was roused, and it burned hotter than the lightning. Fire gleamed from his eyes, seemed to breathe from his throat, and as a huge rock, shot from the catapult sling, flies through the air against walls or turrets filled with soldiery, so with irresistible and death-dealing force the beast rushed on the youths, and overbore Epalamus and Pelagon, who were stationed on the extreme right. Their comrades caught them up as they lay. But Anicemus, the son of Hippocoon, did not escape the boar's fatal stroke. As he in fear was just turning to run, he was hamstrung, and his muscles gave way beneath him. Pylian Nestor came near perishing before he ever went to the Trojan war, but putting forth all his strength, he leaped by his spear-pole into the branches of a tree which stood near by, and from this place of safety he looked down upon the foe he had escaped. The raging beast whetted his tusks on an oak tree's trunk, and threatening destruction, and emboldened by his freshly sharpened tusks, ripped up the thigh of the mighty Hippasus with one sweeping blow. But now the twin brothers, note Castor and Pollux, return to text, not yet set in the starry heavens, came riding up, both conspicuous among the rest, both on horses whiter than snow, both poising their spears, which they threw quivering through the air. And they would have struck the boar, had not the bristly monster taken refuge in the dense woods, whither neither spear nor horse could follow him. Telamon did attempt to follow, and in his eagerness, careless where he went, he fell prone on the ground, caught by a projecting root. While Peleus was helping him to rise, Atalanta notched a swift arrow on the cord, and sent it speeding from her bent bow. The arrow just grazed the top of the boar's back, and remained stuck beneath his ear, staining the bristles with a trickle of blood. Nor did she show more joy over the success of her own stroke than Meleager. He was the first to see the blood, the first to point it out to his companions, and to say, "Due honor shall your brave deed receive." The men, flushed with shame, spurred each other on, gaining courage as they cried out, hurling their spears in disorder. The mass of missiles made them of no effect, and kept them from striking as they were meant to do. Then Ancaeus the Arcadian, armed with a two-headed axe, raging to meet his fate, cried out, "Learn now, O youths, how far a man's weapons surpass a girl's, and leave this task to me. Though Latona's daughter herself shield this boar with her own arrows, in spite of Diana shall my good right arm destroy him." So, swollen with pride and with boastful lips, he spoke, and heaving up in both hands his two-edged axe, he stood on tiptoe, poised to strike. The boar made in upon his bold enemy, and as the nearest point for death, he fiercely struck at the upper part of the groins with his two tusks. Ancaeus fell, His entrails poured out amid streams of blood, and the ground was soaked with gore. Then Ixion's son Pirithous advanced against the foe, brandishing a hunting spear in his strong right hand. To him Theseus cried out in alarm, "Keep away, O dearer to me than my own self, my soul's other half! It is no shame for brave men to fight at long range, and seest rash valor has proved his bane." He spoke, and hurled his own heavy shaft with its sharp bronze point. Though this was well aimed, and seemed sure to reach the mark, a leafy branch of an oak tree turned it aside. Then the son of Aeson hurled his javelin, which chance caused to swerve from its aim and fatally wound an innocent dog, passing clear through his flanks and pinning him to the ground. But the hand of Meleager had a different fortune. He threw 2 spears, the first of which stood in the earth, but the second stuck squarely in the middle of the creature's back. Straightway, while the boar rages and whirls round and round, spouting forth foam and fresh blood in a hissing stream, the giver of the wound presses his advantage, pricks his enemy on to madness, and at last plunges his gleaming hunting spear right through the shoulder. The others vent their joy by wild shouts of applause, and crowd around to press the victor's hand. They gaze in wonder at the huge beast lying stretched out over so much ground, and still think it hardly safe to touch him. But each dips his spear in the blood. Then Meleager, standing with his foot upon that death-dealing head, spoke thus to Atalanta: "Take thou the prize that is of my right, O fair Arcadian, and let my glory be shared with thee." And therewith he presented her with the spoils, the skin with its bristling spikes, and the head remarkable for its huge tusks. She rejoiced in the gift, and no less in the giver. But the others begrudged it, and an angry murmur rose through the whole company. Then too the sons of Thestius, stretching out their arms, cried with a loud voice, "Let be, girl, and do not usurp our honors, and be not deceived by trusting in your beauty, lest this lovesick giver be far from helping you." And they took from her the gift, and from him the right of giving. This was more than that son of Mars could bear, and gnashing his teeth with rage, he cried, "Learn then, you that plunder another's rights, the difference between deeds and threats," and plunged his impious steel deep in Plexippus' heart, who was taken off his guard. Then, as Toxeus stood hesitating what to do, wishing to avenge his brother, but at the same time fearing to share his brother's fate, Meleager gave him scant time to hesitate, but while his spear was still warm with its first victim's slaughter, he warmed it again in his comrade's blood. Althea, in the temple of the gods, was offering thanksgiving for her son's victory, when she saw the corpses of her brothers carried in. She beat her breast and filled the city with woeful lamentation, and changed her gold-spangled robes for black. But when she learned who was their murderer, her grief all fell away, and was changed from tears to the passion for vengeance. There was a billet of wood, which, when the daughter of Thestius lay in childbirth, the 3 sisters threw into the fire, and spinning the threads of life with firm pressed thumb, they sang, "An equal span of life we give to thee, and to this wood, O babe newborn." When the 3 goddesses had sung this prophecy and vanished, the mother snatched the blazing brand from the fire, and quenched it in water. Long had it lain hidden away in a secret place, and guarded safe had safeguarded your life, O youth. And now the mother brought out this billet, and bade her servants make a heap of pine knots and fine kindling, and lit the pile with cruel flame. Then 4 times she made to throw the billet in the flames, and 4 times she held her hand. Mother and sister strove in her, and the 2 names tore one heart this way and that. Often her cheeks grew pale with fear of the impious thing she planned, as often blazing wrath gave its own color to her eyes. Now she looked like one threatening some cruel deed, and now you would think her pitiful. And when the fierce anger of her heart had dried up her tears, still tears would come again. And as a ship, driven by the wind and against the wind by the tide, feels the double force, and yields uncertainly to both, so Thestius' daughter wavered betwixt opposing passions, now quenched her wrath, and now fanned it again. At last the sister in her overcomes the mother, and, that she may appease with blood the shades of her blood kin, she is pious in impiety. For when the devouring flames grow hot, she cries, "Be that the funeral pyre of my own flesh." And as she held the fateful billet in her relentless hand, and stood, unhappy wretch, before the sepulchral fires, she said, "O ye triple goddesses of vengeance, Eumenides, behold these fearful rites. I avenge, and I do a wicked deed. Death must be atoned by death, to crime must crime be added, death to death. Through woes on woes heaped up, let this accursed house go on to ruin. Shall happy Oeneus rejoice in his victorious son, and Thestius be childless? 'Twill be better for you both to grieve. Only do you, my brother's manes, fresh-made ghosts, appreciate my service, and accept the sacrifice I offer at so heavy cost, the baleful tribute of my womb. Ah me, whither am I hurrying? Brothers, forgive a mother's heart. My hands refuse to finish what they began. I confess that he deserves to die, but that I should be the agent of his death I cannot bear. And shall he go scatheless then? Shall he live, victorious and puffed up with his own success, and lord it in Calydon, while you are naught but a handful of ashes, shivering ghosts? I will not suffer it. Let the wretch die, and drag to ruin with him his father's hopes, his kingdom, and his fatherland. Where is my mother love? Where are parents' pious cares? Where are those pangs which 10 long months I bore? Oh, that you had perished in your infancy by those first fires, and I had suffered it. You lived by my gift. Now you shall die by your own desert. Pay the price of your deed. Give back the life I twice gave you, once at your birth, once when I saved the brand. Or else add me to my brother's pyre. I both desire to act and cannot. Oh, what shall I do? Now I can see only my brother's wounds, the sight of that deed of blood, and now love and the name of mother break me down. Woe is me, my brothers, it is ill that you should win, but win you shall. Only let me have the solace that I grant to you, and let me follow you." She spoke, and turning away her face, with trembling hand she threw the fatal billet into the flames. The brand either gave or seemed to give a groan as it was caught and consumed by the unwilling fire. Unconscious, far away, Meleager burns with those flames. He feels his vitals scorching with hidden fire, and o'ercomes the great pain with fortitude. But yet he grieves that he must die a cowardly and bloodless death, and he calls Ancaeus happy for the wounds he suffered. With groans of pain he calls with his dying breath on his aged father, his brothers and loving sisters, and his wife, perchance also upon his mother. The fire and his pains increase, and then die down. Both fire and pain go out together. His spirit gradually slips away into the thin air, as white ashes gradually overspread the glowing coals. Lofty Calydon is brought low. Young men and old, chieftains and commons, lament and groan, and the Caledonian women, dwellers by Euneus' stream, tear their hair and beat their breasts. The father, prone on the ground, defiles his white hair and his aged head with dust, and laments that he has lived too long. For the mother, now knowing her awful deed, has punished herself, driving a dagger through her heart. Not if some god had given me 100 mouths, each with its tongue, a master's genius, and all Helicon's inspiration, could I describe the piteous prayers of those poor sisters. Careless of decency, they beat and bruise their breasts, and while their brother's corpse remains, they caress that corpse over and over, kiss him and kiss the bier as it stands before them. And when he is ashes, they gather the ashes and press them to their hearts, throw themselves on his tomb in abandonment of grief, and clasping the stone on which his name has been carved, they drench the name with their tears. At length Diana, satisfied with the destruction of Parthaon's house, made feathers spring on their bodies. All save Gorge and great Alcmena's daughter-in-law, note Deianira, the wife of Hercules, return to text, stretched out long wings over their arms, gave them a horny beak, and sent them transfigured into the air. Note, these birds were called Meleagrides, guinea hens. Return to text. End of Book 8, Part 1. End of Section 10. Section 11 of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, translated by Frank Justice Miller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Thomas Copeland. Chapter 8, Part 2. Meanwhile, Theseus, having done his part in the confederate task, was on his way back to Tritonia's city, where Erechtheus ruled. But Achelous, swollen with rain, blocked his way and delayed his journey. "Enter my house, illustrious hero of Athens," said the river god, "and do not entrust yourself to my greedy waters. The current is wont to sweep down solid trunks of trees and huge boulders in zigzag course with crash and roar. I have seen great stables that stood near by the bank swept away, cattle and all, and in that current neither strength availed the ox nor speed the horse. Many a strong man also has been overwhelmed in its whirling pools when swollen by melting snows from the mountain sides. It is safer for you to rest until the water shall run within their accustomed bounds, until its own bed shall hold the slender stream." The son of Aegeus replied, "I will use both your house, Achelous, and your advice." And he did use them both. He entered the river god's dark dwelling, built of porous pumice and soft tufa. The floor was damp with soft moss. Conchs and purple shells paneled the ceiling. Now had the blazing sun traversed 2/3 of his daily course, when Theseus and his comrades of the chase disposed themselves upon the couches. Ixion's son lay here, note Pirithous, return to text, and there Lelex, the hero of Troezen, took his place, his temples already sprinkled with grey, and others who had been deemed worthy of equal honor by the Acarnanian river god, who was filled with joy in his noble guest. Without delay, barefoot nymphs set the feast upon the tables, and then, when the food had been removed, they set out the wine in jeweled cups. Then the noble hero, looking forth upon the wide water spread before his eyes, pointed with his finger and said, "What place is that? Tell me the name which that island bears. And yet it seems not to be one island." The river god replied, "No, what you see is not one island. There are 5 islands lying there together, but the distance hides their divisions. And that you may wonder the less at what Diana did when she was slighted, those islands once were nymphs, who, when they had slaughtered 10 bullocks and had invited all the other rural gods to their sacred feast, forgot me as they led the festal dance. I swelled with rage, as full as when my flood flows at the fullest. And so, terrible in wrath, terrible in flood, I tore forests from forests, fields from fields, and with the place they stood on I swept the nymphs away, who at last remembered me then, into the sea. There my flood and the sea, united, cleft the undivided ground into as many parts as now you see the Echinides yonder amid the waves. But, as you yourselves see, away, look, far away beyond the others, is one island that I love. The sailors call it Perimele. She was beloved by me, and from her I took the name of maiden. Her father, Hippodamus, was enraged with this, and he hurled his daughter to her death down from a high cliff into the deep. I caught her, and supporting her as she swam, I cried, "O thou god of the trident, to whom the lot gave the kingdom next to the world, even the wandering waves. Bring aid, I pray, to one drowned by a father's cruelty. Give her a place, O Neptune, or else let her become a place herself. While I prayed, a new land embraced her floating form, and a solid island grew from her transformed shape. With these words the river was silent. The story of the miracle had moved the hearts of all, but one mocked at their credulity, a scoffer at the gods, one reckless in spirit, Ixion's son Pirithous. "These are but fairy tales you tell, Achelous," he said, "and you concede too much power to the gods, if they give and take away the forms of things." All the rest were shocked, and disapproved such words, and especially Ledex, ripe both in mind and years, who replied, "The power of heaven is indeed immeasurable, and has no bounds, and whatever the gods decree is done. And, that you may believe it, there stand in the Phrygian hill country an oak and a linden tree, side by side, surrounded by a low wall. I have myself seen the spot, for Pythius sent me to Phrygia, where his father once ruled. Not far from the place I speak of is a marsh, once a habitable land, but now water, the haunt of divers and coots. Hither came Jupiter in the guise of a mortal, and with his father came Atlas' grandson, he that bears the caduceus, his wings laid aside. To 1,000 homes they came, seeking a place for rest. 1,000 homes were barred against them. Still one house received them, humble indeed, thatched with straw and reeds from the marsh, but pious old Baucis and Philemon, of equal age, were in that cottage, wedded in their youth, and in that cottage had grown old together. There they made their poverty light by owning it, and by bearing it in a contented spirit. It was of no use to ask for masters or for servants in that house. They too were the whole household. Together they served and ruled. And so, when the heavenly ones came to this humble home, and stooping entered in at the lowly door, the old man set out a bench, and bade them rest their limbs, while over this bench busy Baucis threw a rough covering. Then she raked aside the warm ashes on the hearth, and fanned yesterday's coals to life, which she fed with leaves and dry bark, blowing them into flame with the breath of her old body. Then she took down from the roof some fine split wood and dry twigs, broke them up, and placed them under the little copper kettle. And she took the cabbage which her husband had brought in from the well-watered garden, and lopped off the outside leaves. Meanwhile the old man, with a forked stick, reached down a kind of smoked bacon, which was hanging from a blackened beam, and cutting off a little piece of the long-cherished pork, he put it to cook in the boiling water. Meanwhile they beguiled the intervening time with their talk. A mattress of soft sedge-grass was placed on a couch, with frame and feet of willow. They threw drapery over this, which they were not accustomed to bring out except on festal days, but even this was a cheap thing and well worn, a very good match for the willow couch. The gods reclined. The old woman, with her skirts tucked up, with trembling hands set out the table, but one of its 3 legs was too short, so she propped it up with a potsherd. When this had levelled the slope, she wiped it, thus levelled, with green mint. Next she placed on the board some olives, green and ripe, truthful Minerva's berries, and some autumnal cornel cherries pickled in the lees of wine. Endives and radishes, cream cheese, and eggs, lightly roasted in the warm ashes, all served in earthen dishes. After these viands, an embossed mixing bowl of the same costly ware was set on, together with cups of beechwood, coated on the inside with yellow wax. A moment, and the hearth sent its steaming viands on, and wine of no great age was brought out, which was then pushed aside to give a small space for the second course. Here were nuts and figs, with dried dates, plums, and fragrant apples in broad baskets, and purple grapes just picked from the vines. In the center of the table was a comb of clear white honey. Besides all this, pleasant faces were at the board, and lively and abounding goodwill. Meanwhile they saw that the mixing bowl, as often as it was drained, kept filling of its own accord. and that the wine welled up of itself. The two old people saw this strange sight with amaze and fear, and with upturned hands they both uttered a prayer, Baucis and the trembling old Philemon, and they craved indulgence for their fair and meagre entertainment. They had one goose, the guardian of their tiny estate, and him the hosts were preparing to kill for their divine guests. But the goose was swift of wing, and quite wore the slow old people out in their efforts to catch him. He eluded their grasp for a long time, and finally seemed to flee for refuge to the gods themselves. Then the gods told them not to kill the goose. "We are gods," they said, "and this wicked neighborhood shall be punished as it deserves. But to you shall be given exemption from this punishment. Leave now your dwelling, and come with us to that tall mountain yonder." They both obeyed, and, propped on their staves, they struggled up the long slope. When they were a bowshot distant from the top, they looked back and saw the whole countryside covered with water, only their own house remaining. And while they wondered at this, while they wept for the fate of their neighbors, that old house of theirs, which had been small even for its two occupants, was changed into a temple. Marble columns took the place of the forked wooden supports. The straw grew yellow and became a golden roof. There were gates richly carved, a marble pavement covered the ground. Then calmly the son of Saturn spoke. "Now ask of us, thou good old man, and thou, wife, worthy of thy good husband, any boon you will." When he had spoken a word with Baucis, Philemon announced their joint decision to the gods. "We ask that we may be your priests and guard your temple. And since we have spent our lives in constant company, we pray that the same hour may bring death to both of us, that I may never see my wife's tomb, nor be buried by her." Their request was granted. They had the care of the temple as long as they lived, and at last, when, spent with extreme old age, they chanced to stand before the sacred edifice talking of old times, Baucis saw Philemon putting forth leaves. Philemon saw Baucis, and, as the tree-top formed over their two faces, while they still could, they cried with the same words, "Farewell, dear mate," just as the bark closed over and hid their lips. Even to this day the Bithynian peasant in that region points out two trees standing close together and growing from one double trunk. These things were told me by staid old men who could have had no reason to deceive. With my own eyes I saw votive wreaths hanging from the boughs, and placing fresh wreaths there myself, I said, "Those whom the gods care for are gods. Let those who have worshipped be worshipped." Lilacs made an end. Both the tale and the teller had moved them all, Theseus especially. When he would hear more of the wonderful doings of the gods, the Caledonian river god, propped upon his elbow, thus addressed him: "Some there are, bravest of heroes, whose form has been once changed and remained in its new state. To others the power is given to assume many forms, as to thee, Proteus, dweller in the earth-embracing sea. For now men saw thee as a youth, now as a lion. Now thou wast a raging boar, now a serpent whom men would fear to touch. Now horns made thee a bull. Often thou couldst appear as a stone, often again a tree. Sometimes, assuming the form of flowing water, thou wast a stream, and sometimes a flame, the water's enemy. No less power had the wife of Autolycus, Erysichthon's daughter. This Erysichthon was a man who scorned the gods and burnt no sacrifice on their altars. He, so the story goes, once violated the sacred grove of Ceres with the axe, and profaned those ancient trees with steel. There stood among these a mighty oak with strength matured by centuries of growth, itself a grove. Round about it hung woolen fillets, votive tablets, and wreaths of flowers, witnesses of granted prayers. Often beneath this tree dryads held their festival dances. Often, with hand linked to hand in line, they would encircle the great tree, whose mighty girth was full 15 ells. It towered as high above other trees as they were higher than the grass that grew beneath. Yet not for this did Priapus' son, note Erysichthon, return to text, withhold his axe, as he bade his slaves cut down the sacred oak. But when he saw that they shrank back, the wretch snatched an axe from one of them, and said, "Though this be not only the tree that the goddess loves, but even the goddess herself, now shall its leafy top touch the ground." He spoke, and while he poised his axe for the slanting stroke, the oak of Dio, note, i.e. Ceres, return to text, trembled and gave forth a groan. At the same time its leaves and its acorns grew pale, its long branches took on a pallid hue. But when that impious stroke cut into the trunk, blood came streaming forth from the severed bark, even as when a huge sacrificial bull has fallen at the altar, and from his smitten neck the blood pours forth. All were astonied, and one, bolder than the rest, tried to stop his wicked deed and stay his cruel axe. But the Thessalian looked at him and said, "Take that to pay you for your pious thought," and turning the axe from the tree against the man, lopped off his head. Then, as he struck the oak blow after blow, from within the tree a voice was heard. "I, a nymph most dear to Ceres, dwell within this wood, and I prophesy with my dying breath, and find my death's solace in it, that punishment is at hand for what you do." But he accomplished his crime, and at length the tree, weakened by countless blows and drawn down by ropes, fell, and with its weight laid low a wide stretch of woods around. All the Dryad sisters were stupefied at their own and their forest's loss, and mourning, clad in black robes, they went to Ceres and prayed her to punish Erysichthon. The beautiful goddess consented, and with a nod of her head shook the fields heavy with ripening grain. She planned in her mind a punishment that might make men pity, but that no man could pity him for such deeds, to rack him with dreadful famine. But since the goddess herself could not go to her, for the fates do not permit Ceres and famine to come together, she summoned one of the mountain deities, a rustic Oread, and thus addressed her. "There is a place on the farthest border of icy Scythia, a gloomy and barren soil, a land without corn, without trees. Sluggish cold dwells there, and pallor, fear, and gaunt famine. So bid famine hide herself in the sinful stomach of that impious wretch. Let no abundance satisfy her, and let her overcome my utmost power to feed. And that the vast journey may not daunt you, take my chariot and my winged dragons, and guide them aloft." And she gave the reins into her hands. The nymph, borne through the air in her borrowed chariot, came to Scythia, and on a bleak mountain top, which men call Caucasus, unyoked her dragon steeds. Seeking out famine, she saw her in a stony field, plucking with nails and teeth at the scanty herbage. Her hair hung in matted locks, her eyes were sunken, her face ghastly pale, her lips were wan and foul, her throat rough with scurf. Her skin was hard and dry, so that the entrails could be seen through it. Her skinny hip bones bulged out beneath her hollow loins, and her belly was but a belly's place. Her breast seemed to be hanging free, and just to be held by the framework of the spine. Her thinness made her joints seem large, her knees were swollen, and her ankles were great bulging lumps. When the nymph saw her in the distance, for she did not dare approach her, she delivered to her the goddess' commands. And though she tarried but a little while, though she kept far from her, and had but now arrived, still she seemed to feel the famine. Then, mounting high in air, she turned her course, and drove the dragons back to Thessaly. Famine did the bidding of Ceres, although their tasks are ever opposite, and flew through the air on the wings of the wind to the appointed mansion. Straight she entered the chamber of the impious king, who was sunk in deep slumber, for it was night. There she wrapped her skinny arms about him, and filled him with herself, breathing upon his throat and breast and lips, and in his hollow veins she planted hunger. When her duty was done, she left the fertile world, and returned to the homes of want and her familiar caverns. Still, gentle sleep, hovering on peaceful wings, soothes Erysichthon, and in his sleep he dreams of feasting, champs his jaws on nothing, wearies tooth upon tooth, cheats his gullet with fancied food, for his banquet is nothing but empty air. But when he awakes, a wild craving for food lords it in his ravenous jaws and in his burning stomach. Straightway he calls for all that sea and land and air can furnish. With loaded tables before him, he complains still of hunger. In the midst of feasts seeks other feasts. What would be enough for whole cities, enough for a whole nation, is not enough for one. The more he sends down into his maw, the more he wants. And as the ocean receives the streams from a whole land, and is not filled with its waters, but swallows up the streams that come to it from afar, and as the all-devouring fire never refuses fuel, but burns countless logs, seeks ever more as more is given it, and is more greedy by reason of the quantity, so do the lips of impious Erysichthon receive all those banquets and ask for more. All food in him is but the cause of food, and ever does he become empty by eating. And now famine at his belly's deep abyss had exhausted his ancestral stores, but even then ravenous famine remained unexhausted, and his raging greed was still unappeased. At last, when all his fortunes had been swallowed up, there remained only his daughter, worthy of a better father. Penniless he sold even her. The high-spirited girl refused a master, and stretching out her hands over the neighboring waves, she cried, "Save me from slavery, O thou who hast already stolen my virginity." This Neptune had taken. He did not refuse her prayer, and though her master, following her, had seen her but now, the god changed her form, gave her the features of a man and garments proper to a fisherman. Her master, looking at this person, said, "Oh, you who conceal the dangling hook in a little bait, you that handle the rod, so may the sea be calm, so be the fish trustful in the wave for your catching, and feel no hook until you strike. Where is she, tell me, who but now stood on this shore with mean garments and disordered hair? For I saw her standing upon the shore, and her tracks go no farther." She perceived by this that the god's gift was working well, and, delighted that one asked her of herself, answered his question in these words: "Whoever you are, excuse me, sir. I have not taken my eyes from this pool to look in any direction. I have been altogether bent on my fishing, and, that you may believe me, so may the god of the sea assist this art of mine, as it is true that for a long time back no man has stood upon this shore except myself, and no woman either." Her master believed, and turning upon the sands, he left the spot completely deceived. Then her former shape was given back to her. But when her father perceived that his daughter had the power to change her form, he sold her often, and to many masters, but now in the form of a mare, now bird, now cow, now deer, away she went, and so found food, though not fairly, for her greedy father. At last, when the strength of the plague had consumed all these provisions, and but added to his fatal malady, the wretched man began to tear his own flesh with his greedy teeth, and by consuming his own body fed himself. But why do I dwell on tales of others? I myself, young sirs, have often changed my form. But my power is limited in its range, For sometimes I appear as you see me now, sometimes I change to a serpent. Again I am leader of a herd, and put my strength into my horns. Horns, I say, so long as I could. But now one of the weapons of my forehead is gone, as you yourself can see." He ended with a groan. End of Book 8, Part 2. End of Section 11.